also been honored with several distinguished awards. If you could just tell me more details about it.
Well, I mean, you know, various things. I mean, I've received some awards, like, for example, you know, the Netherlands government Prince Bernhard Awards and, you know, things like that. But I suppose the more important things, rather than awards, are the kinds of things that I've been asked to do. I would say that, for example, much more satisfying than just getting an award or a medal or something is to actually be asked to do things like when I was invited to teach at Yale University.
Right.
And when I essentially was asked to be a visiting professor and teach a course, and that was something I could design. And I essentially taught from experience. I taught them about the issues that were around the world of conservation, environment.
Experience you passed on.
Well, the history of the environmental movements in Asia.
Right.
That was basically what I taught.
Okay.
And I was able to take case studies from Pakistan, the development of our national conservation strategy, and how that came about, which became Pakistan's environmental plan. And being able to teach that to PhD students, to master's students, was very satisfying.
Right.
So I suppose that really is much more, in a sense, a
bigger award for
recognition.
you, right?
Yeah.
Ma'am, according to you, what are the 3 success factors of your life?
I suppose one of the things that makes a successful person has to be a combination of their upbringing, their education, and their values. So I suppose that's the one I would attribute as the foundational aspect of success.
Right.
I think a sense of values which is based around the way you relate to human beings, responsibility in terms of your country, obligations, duty. I grew up in families that grew up with fairly Victorian values, but values that had a lot to do with compassion, charity, generosity, responsibility, a sense that what you get from your country, you give back. And that, unfortunately, I find is missing in a lot of the education of the young people today. There is no sense that you give back something in terms of what the country has given you. And when I say the country, I mean in terms of just the very fact that you've built your life on the land with its people.
Right.
And not just in terms of, you know, what has the government given me, or what have I got from X, Y, or Z, but more a sense of what does the land give you, you know. And that sense, I think, is important. Compassion, a sense of tolerance.
Right.
I think we've lost a lot of that. So I would say all those contribute to success because they make you a much more aware person. They connect you much more to a bigger family of people that extends beyond your community, your race, your biradari, and even in many cases your country.
Right.
And when you take that kind of worldview, and that comes to values, when you take that kind of worldview, when you have those sorts of values, then, you know, success comes quite easily. Because what you're basing your life on is something much deeper and much more profound than the sort of material gains that most people look for.
Right.
And which tend to be very superficial and tend to, in many ways, really lead you into, the impulses behind those don't make for long-term success.
Right. Ma'am, I have this one question. A lot of females find it difficult. You have raised 3 kids with your work life. How difficult was it to manage work life with your family life?
It's not easy. You have to have 2 things in place. One is a very strong support system, starting with, you know, your spouse and your family. And if they're willing to assist, enable, that makes a huge difference. And then one of the reasons, for example, that in the days when the children were growing up, I did not take many of the offers that came to me from the West. You know, I was asked many, many times in my career to move to Washington or New York or Geneva or London. And I did take those offers because I knew that if I did, I would not have the support system of family in raising the children. And that I would see much less of my children and they would have a far poorer quality of care than if I stayed in Pakistan,
Right.
and or in any parts of Asia. This is true for women.
Right.
So I think that was a choice I made, and I've never regretted it, because that enabled me to do both things.
Right.
And the second thing I would say is you have to be fairly disciplined and well organized, because time becomes the most important
Time
thing.
management, yeah.
And where you prioritize your time, how you spend it, what you do, what you don't do, becomes very much a part of the ability to manage both worlds.
Ma'am, who has been your inspiration throughout the life? You have been an inspiration for millions of females out there, but who has been your particular inspiration?
I've derived inspiration from lots of people. I've had role models within my own family. My grandmother, my mother were great inspirations for me. They too led lives of tremendous courage, and you know, they were pioneers in their own way. Then, you know, my father, my grandfather, my uncles. But apart from that, I've been very fortunate. I've had great mentors through my entire career.
Right.
Starting with when I was in the family business, it was largely my father and grandfather. But then when I started work with the government of Sindh, somebody like Mr. W.A. Kirmani, who's still around, and he was the first Inspector General of Forests. He was the Secretary of Forests at the time. He was a tremendous mentor and inspiration for me. Taught me a lot. And then throughout my career, I've worked with some of the great men in Pakistan, and with the women, you know, and they've all been inspiring.
So people around you have inspired
Yes, absolutely, and a lot of other Asians, you know, in the 80s and the 90s, is probably when you had some of the most inspirational leaders emerging within Asia. You know, everybody from Professor Yunus, Akhtar Hamid Khan, Shoaib Sultan Khan, you know, the big social movements that took place in South Asia had tremendous leaders. And I've been very fortunate to know most of them, to have worked with most of them, to have had many of them guide me. But then also in the West, I mean, there have been Director Generals of IUCN. One of the first Director Generals I worked with was a tremendous inspiration.
Right.
Some of the people who started the environmental movement internationally are people I've worked with, and they've been great inspirations as well. So one owes one's success to many people
around you.
and I've been fortunate to know a lot of them.
Right. Ma'am, in the end, your message for the nation of Pakistan.
I suppose what I would say is that I know that the country at this point is going through difficult times, but I suppose I would say that having known a better Pakistan, having known a Pakistan that was something we all had great dreams and hopes for, I think my message would be that, you know, continue to do the best that you can for the country, and be patient, because I believe that the current generation of youth has everything it needs to turn things around.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was an honor to have you on our show.
Thank you very much.
For more Pakistani profiles, you can visit our website, pakistaniprofiles.com.